I am convinced, and I think you should be convinced too, that you do not need to have a super powered camera to get really beautiful footage. If you learn to perfect your shooting with what you have in your pocket, and no, I do not mean your vape pen or your hunting knife, I'm talking about your smartphone. Pardon the skid marks on my desk. Oh, gosh. If you learn to film great content on this device first, all of that is going to translate over when you start shooting on a DSLR or a mirrorless or even a cinema camera, and your film is going to just be that much better. One of the quickest ways to take your smartphone footage up to the next level is with a stabilizer, with a gimbal. I have 3 that I'm currently using that I'm showing off today, as well as some tips and tricks around stabilization to help you get that beautiful cinematic footage. Starting with the most affordable, the Osmo 2 is one of the most accessible and versatile tools that you could be using as a smartphone filmmaker. Now, we've been talking smartphone lenses in my last handful of videos, and so for all of these setups, I'm going to up that complexity by adding moment lenses on all of them. Where's that extra complexity coming from? The weight of the lens and thus balancing the device on the gimbal. So for all of these, we're going to also need counterweights. We've got aftermarket weights and a clamp for like 15 bucks, or the cheaper option. Hey mom, do you or dad have any physical currency? What? No, I need quarters. I don't have any here. All I have is Bitcoin. Okay. Mama Moore hooked me up. She's good people. For using this with Moment's wide angle lens, duct tape, stack of coins, we're looking at about $5.50, and what in the world is that? It looks like an Israeli shekel. I'm just roughly bundling these all together first, just enough to keep them all in place. And then I'm throwing it on the furthest portion of the gimbal. And look at that. Perfectly balanced. Looking at the device, we've got the on and off button. It's also a function button. We've got the joystick, we've got a record button, and then we've got a zoom trigger on the left side. Now let's take a look at performance. DJI is rocking their own app to link up with the gimbal for you to be able to control settings. And right out of the box, first tip, it's definitely going to need some help. I'm lowering the zoom sensitivity to roughly 30%. You gotta get that slower cinematic zoom going. The joystick movements, they're just too quick for me right out of the box, so I'm generally having those on slow. And the joystick, it should be set to free. Otherwise, it's limited to left, right, up, or down at any given point. Free allows you to move it at any different angle. It's a much better option. Now, my gimbal's not whipping all over the place like a wild child. It is much more usable. Now, I'm not really all that worried about getting the video record settings honed in because the iPhone is able to shoot at 4K 60 frames per second and the DJI app is only able to record at 4K 30 frames per second. I'm going to be filming in Filmic Pro to allow me to extract all those frames at 4K. That said, I will jump into the app for different lapses. Motion lapse, hyperlapse, time lapse, especially motion lapse where you can set multiple waypoints in the motion process. That said, even like this series of shots from my lens video, this wasn't a hyperlapse. I filmed these all walking forward and then reversed them and added blur to them in post, so I don't find myself using these often. All of this film from Chicago was shot on Moment and Sandmark lenses using the Osmo, shot in 4K at 60 frames per second, showing that you can absolutely get smooth, beautiful footage with nothing more expensive than this. My coins are sagging. Here's some thoughts though. The weight of this rig, it's really light, which is great for arm fatigue, but for filmmaking, it can actually become a negative. It's much harder to hold this steady than a heavier camera, and so it is going to be more subject to smaller micro movements. 3 points of contact is always ideal for stabilization, 2 points is okay, 1 is generally a no-go. Luckily here, you can two-hand it pretty easily, it's fairly comfortable, but I'm not the hugest fan of the over-under technique, and you'll see what I mean by that here soon. With that in mind, it's still a DJI product at the end of the day. They're killer when it comes to stabilization and developing stabilized products. The Osmo's no exception, although it does leave some to be desired in terms of stabilization customization. If you're just jumping into smartphone gimbals, if you're tight on a budget, or you just need a light travel companion, the Osmo 2 is a really solid starting point. Freefly, who's responsible for pro-level stabilizers like the Movi Pro, they created their version of a smartphone stabilizer, and frankly, it's just straight fire. Now, while it might seem like these two systems are very similar, they just come in different form factors, that honestly couldn't be further from the truth. The methods by which they both operate are completely different, and I'm going to go ahead and say I greatly prefer the Freefly system over the DJI. The system by itself is about 50% heavier, which for me is actually a positive because it promotes slightly better stability and reduces shakiness. It's got an 8-hour battery versus Osmo's 15-hour, and it is much more expensive on the whole. I mean, when you add in that counterweight system for both of them, you're talking $370 for the Freefly system versus like $160 for the Osmo. Movi's system does take a little bit of time to nail when it comes to balancing it with that counterweight system, but it's just much more versatile at the end of the day with the Freefly integrated counterweight system. That said, here's my bread and butter on how I make this system a beast. DJI sells their Ronin S tripod legs for 40 bucks, And you can attach this to the 1/4-20 on the bottom. Now, you have two incredibly solid handholds that kind of form this box around the smartphone. Having these two grip points greatly improves my stability, especially when walking, when maneuvering around, as well as my ability to actually perform more advanced camera maneuvers. Like the barrel roll maneuver, now it is so much easier to get that smooth spin, keeping the lens as centered as possible because you have hands on either side of the camera body. Now when you're done, of course, now you got a really solid tripod to set it down on. You didn't need it beforehand. The way they designed it, they made it so you can set it down anywhere, but I still like having the tripod built in. This all leads me to their software and the device itself. Movi's button layout, it just makes sense. It's obviously designed for videographers. You're getting variable effects with the trigger on the back based on the mode you're in. Record is right above that on the back of the handhold. On the front, you've got media playback on the left, front and back camera switch on the right, and then exposure controls, locking and unlocking with the middle and raising and lowering it with the top and bottom buttons. They notably do not have a joystick control like you see on the Osmo, but I'm honestly okay with this because you have the ability to program in specific camera moves over an allotted time. So let's say I want to walk backwards and have the camera lower, I can either just perform the move manually or I can program in a vertical move of the camera while only focusing on smooth walking. All of the camera modes that they have available really just make a ton of sense for videographers. With the echo movement mode I mentioned earlier, hyperlapse and time-lapse, both with, again, programmable movements, an orbiting mode to smoothly film around an object, the barrel roll, which will actually allow you to do full 360s if you're willing to move it in your hands, and a tripod mode where the camera is held by the servos in one position at any angle. And honestly, I use all of them. Freefly really killed it too by putting key gimbal preferences right there on the home screen, changing tilt and roll locking and then altering the responsiveness speed and how large that window is in which you can move the gimbal before it starts to register or change in motion. A huge perk here too, their app does allow you to film in 4K at 60 frames per second, so I don't feel a need to necessarily go to Filmic Pro. Because it is able to shoot at that 60 frames per second, I do find myself filming in-app, allowing me to use all the full controls of the gimbal. The stability of this setup, the features that come with the app, the overall build quality, this tool allows me to much more accurately and effectively bring my creative vision to life. It's my baby. I did it. Haha. I mounted my iPhone on my Ronin S. Now, while there are no apps like that for the Osmo 2 that give you panorama functionality, things of that nature that connect your phone directly to your gimbal and do some different things other than calibration, this setup is unbelievable, especially for giving you that extra control, that extra stability, the extra weight that it comes with. It really stabilizes your iPhone footage at a whole new level. I mean, this is just a level of control that I always want with my smartphone. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want that when filming with their smartphone? This is awesome. So what all do I have going on here right now? Well, my goal with this build was I want to be able to mount my phone with just parts that I have laying around already, and one of the biggest struggles that I had was getting enough weight on here that the Ronin was able to handle it. The iPhone by itself is just too light, so what I ended up doing, I took a cheese plate, I took this old iPhone mount that I had, it had multiple components to it, so I took the components off of that. I used a 1/4-20 to 1/4-20 adapter, and I connected the cheese plate then to that iPhone holder. From there, I went ahead and put the base plate on it and mounted that onto the Ronin. Now the problem was, like I said, it didn't weigh enough, so what I ended up doing is just taking a simple counterweight, and there was a 1/4-20 on the back of the phone mount, so I threw that on there. That added enough weight for it to be able to be balanced. I could have gone quick release plate directly into this phone mount. The problem is I really wanted the flexibility to be able to move this setup around in space based on where that weight needed to be distributed. So the cheese plate allowed me to do that, and then if I needed to add more weight, I could have put more weight on there as well. So the cheese plate was actually a big piece of allowing this setup to work. Gotta make sure you go ahead and calibrate it as well, especially with the lighter weight of this versus what I normally put on it, which is the 1DX. It always sounds like I'm destroying my gimbal every time I run it through this process. And there we go, we got it balanced. For no other reason than why the heck not, I threw Zhiyun's dual grip, competitor of Ronin, fits perfectly on the bottom of here. I threw their handle on here to get that awesome side grip. Again, this is one of the best kept secrets for the Ronin S. Throw this side grip on there for like 40 bucks, so much more comfortable, easier to hold for extended periods of time. Great little, I wouldn't even call it a camera hack, just a great addition to your Ronin. On top of the handle, I mounted the Aperture Amaran AL-MX LED light. This thing is a little beast. I love it. It's got a detachable diffuser on the front. From there, you could take little gels. You can throw those gels on the front. Okay, so you can't really tell that that was teal, but gels. It also has an adjustable temperature. I'm not getting paid to say this at all. Aperture, we don't have a relationship at this point, but we really should. This is an over-the-top, unnecessary beast mode build for filming with the iPhone, and I absolutely love it. As a side note though, there is one really substantial benefit that comes with this over the others. So especially if you're in a situation where you're going to be switching out between lenses. So in my case, I might be switching out between the wide and the anamorphic. Using those counterweighting systems, especially taping the coins on there, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort to swap in and out. With the Ronin, you actually get to take advantage of all of the built-in balancing tools. You can simply move around those sliders and balance it just like you would if you were changing out lenses on a DSLR on here. Now, am I advocating for you to actually do this? No, I'm not. There's no reason to do this, but if you already own a Ronin, if you're used to using a Ronin, you don't have to go buy a smartphone stabilizer. You can get a few quick components for super cheap. You can throw your smartphone on here, and if you can deal with the weight, if it's something that's manageable for a shoot, it's a pretty dang good solution. Anyways, thank y'all so much for watching. Thumbs up if you liked the video. Subscribe if you loved it. Hit the notification bell because apparently subscriptions don't mean anything anymore. Get out, get creative, do what makes you come alive, and I'll see you in the next video.